Hi, and welcome to the Debrief, Carolina Journal's weekly recap of North Carolina public policy. I'm Colin Tierney, one of the summer interns here at Carolina Journal. I'm filling in for Donna King this week. She's asked us to do an intern takeover, talking about some of the investigative reporting we've done this summer on bridge protests and budget audits. We're also going to be talking about some stories about some legislative studies, as well as town audits that you might have seen in the news recently. We've got a lot to get into this week. First, let me introduce our first two guests. On my right is Dylan Coombs. He's a two-time graduate of Liberty University, most recently earning his master's in public policy this spring. Dylan, thanks for being here today.
Thank you for having me, Colin.
And on my left is Cody Snipes. He just graduated from App State with his bachelor's in political science. He'll be starting law school at Regent University this fall. Cody, thanks for being here today.
Blessed to be here.
Let's start off by looking at these budget earmarks. For the first time in over 1,000 days, state lawmakers passed a comprehensive state spending plan earlier this month. It includes 727 earmarks that total more than $550 million in spending. Two of those earmarks are for a gated community in Harnett County. That community is called Carolina Lakes. There are over 1,700 homes there, 7 lakes. They're getting $300,000. $160,000 is for what state lawmakers described in the budget as emergency services needs, and another $140,000 for what lawmakers called various needs, which they said include shelter repairs, replacement, and maintenance. Dylan, you and I broke this story on CarolinaJournal.com this week. What do we know about this private community that is getting public funding?
Yeah, that's right, Colin. So Carolina Lakes Property Owners Association, like you mentioned, is getting about $300,000 for these very vague projects. Now, I wrote a couple things down. I want to just give you a picture of the size and luxury of the amenities that they have. Like you mentioned, it's a gated community with 1,700 homes. They have one marina, 24 boat slips, a clubhouse, various athletic fields, and other amenities. And I bring that up because really this is a luxurious lakeside homeowners association getting taxpayer dollars for various unspecific special projects. Now, in addition to all these amenities that I mentioned, they have these 2 shelters that also can be rented out for $60 a use with a $100 deposit. Now, we at CJ, we also looked into their annual fees. Unfortunately, we hit a wall. We couldn't find out those fees because they were password protected. But it just raises a lot of questions. Why is this private organization receiving these taxpayer dollars when it seems like they could pay for some of these things themselves by just raising rental fees or raising the annual fee? So it just raises some pretty valid questions.
Yeah, if you do the math there, $300,000, you've got 1,700 homes about in that neighborhood. You're looking at only about $175 per resident. So it doesn't seem like a huge burden on that community. I should mention we reached out to the Property Owners Association for comment. The board declined to comment. Now, the other side of it is the lawmakers who got them the money. Were you able to figure out who got them the money in the state budget?
Unfortunately, we were not. And that's because the way these special appropriations work right now, lawmakers don't have to put their name besides the money that they request. Now, in 2017, Verla Insco introduced a bill called the Ensure Budget Transparency Act. It would have required lawmakers to put their name next to these special earmarks. But unfortunately, that bill failed, and similar motions like that have failed. But acts like that would do a lot to bring accountability and responsibility to lawmakers when they make these special appropriation requests.
Yeah, we know that now former State Senator Terrence Everett most recently introduced similar legislation, so be interested to see if we see something like that again in the new session starting in the new year. I think one other interesting part of the story is where the money is coming from. The money came from what's called the Regional Economic Development Reserve. It's a savings account. The money didn't come out of the general fund. Tell me more about that.
That's right. The General Assembly has these special reserve funds. They're kind of like rainy day funds or special savings accounts for special projects. Now, the Regional Economic Development Fund, what's interesting about that fund in particular is that around 2020 and in the past 6 years, the General Assembly started creating a lot more of these special funds. And in the past 6 years, they've created actually 20 of these funds, bringing the grand total to about 33 special reserve funds. Now, the reason that's important is because when they pull money from these special funds, they don't have to claim that the money came out of the general fund. And this sort of obscures the true number of their spending. Brian Balfour at the John Locke Foundation has done a lot of work looking into this, and he found that in this most recent 2026 budget, the General Assembly took about $3 billion from the special reserve funds, $200 million of which was taken from this specific Regional Economic Development Fund. And a lot of that money went to these special earmarks, including the Carolina Lakes Property Owners Association.
Dylan, great reporting on this topic. Stay tuned next week on CarolinaJournal.com. We've been reaching out to some of the state lawmakers from that area. Haven't published anything on that yet. A lot of them are on vacation at some conferences this week, so want to give them an opportunity to comment, but be looking out for an update on this story early next week. Cody, I want to swing over to you. While Dylan's been looking at some of the funding out of these special reserves, Cody, you've been looking at some spending out of the general fund, including $60 million for more than 40 studies that the legislature is asking the North Carolina Collaboratory to start working on. Let's start here. What is the North Carolina Collaboratory?
Yeah, the North Carolina Collaboratory is a state-created research organization that operates under our university system. Back in 2016, state lawmakers created it to help explore policy areas of interest that they might need some more research on. So what happens is the lawmakers commission studies through the budget. There it goes to the collaboratory where they gather a group of experts to further research it, and they then report their findings back to the legislature. This often precedes future legislation, so it gives us a good idea what lawmakers are considering in the future.
Yeah, we know education policy is an important topic for a lot of our viewers. Are there any studies related to education in this year's budget?
Yeah, two big education-related studies. The first is an open enrollment study. Open enrollment allows students within public schools within their district to attend other schools rather than their designated base school. So the study will examine the 4 current open enrollment districts in North Carolina, as well as how we can implement further changes maybe statewide. So they're going to be looking at application processes, transportation, different school capacities and how that is affected, as well as appeals processes and denials. Research from the John Locke Foundation has indicated that open enrollment leads to greater student outcomes as well as greater competition among districts. The second education-related study relates to funding. There is $300,000 set aside for a work group to analyze and transition North Carolina to a weighted student funding model. This will transition us away from our current allotment-based funding model where funds are allocated across 60-ish different allotment-based systems. Additionally, the transition to this weighted student funding formula model will increase transparency and accountability of where these funds are going, and they will follow the student from different schools if they decide to transfer or attend in different schools.
Yeah, 2 very interesting studies. They're looking forward to seeing what the collaboratory is able to find. In our Carolina Journal poll, we found that cost of living and inflation is the #1 issue for voters going into the fall election. Any studies in the budget that might help lower the cost of living for North Carolinians?
Yeah, affordability has been a big topic recently, and unfortunately, we didn't see much related to these studies. However, there was one healthcare cost study that's worth noting. In that study, lawmakers are going to be looking at how healthcare costs have increased over the last couple years and how we can look to decrease them. This study will precede another study that is coming in 2028, so maybe not much change on that affordability front. Another health-related study, though, that's worth noting, $15 million was set aside for firefighter protection. Within the study, lawmakers are looking at and analyzing the groundwater and drinking water that firefighters are using. The funds are set aside to provide water supplies and filtration systems for those stations and firefighters that are impacted.
Any other studies in the budget that stood out to you?
Yeah, 2 entertainment and business-related studies worth noting. First, NASCAR fans across the state might get excited about this. It was a motorsports industry study. $400,000 was set aside to update a 2004 study analyzing the effects and economic impact of motorsports in our state. The second was a fireworks regulation study that looks at expanding the impact and use of fireworks in the state. So the study will analyze the various economic impacts as well as safety precautions, emergency service, and how those fireworks will sell, as well as tax incentives or how to funnel the taxes for those to maybe some education-related stuff.
Yeah, I'd be really curious to see what comes out of that fireworks study in particular. I know in recent sessions, lawmakers have tried to loosen our state's fireworks laws, make them more comparable to our neighbors over in Tennessee and South Carolina. Most recently, Representative Wyatt Gable, the youngest member of the General Assembly, had a bill on that last summer. It metaphorically exploded in committee. So interested to see if any of the findings from that study create some momentum on either side of the fireworks.
Yeah, this is
debate.
very similar to sports gambling in the state. People are going to do it anyway, so we might as well regulate it in a way that we can benefit from it.
Yeah. Switching from the legislative branch over to the executive branch, last week the state auditor released the findings into his investigation into the finances in the town of Cary. He and his team found what they call extravagant spending of taxpayer dollars. That includes over $120,000 on video productions during its 2024 town council retreat down in Wilmington, including this video here. Watch this. Cody, certainly a lot to take in there. What other spending did the state auditor find?
Yeah, the auditor also pointed out that about 62% of town employees had town-issued credit cards. Just to put that in perspective, only local governments across the state, only about 16% of their town employees do have those. So based on those company credit card charges, they racked up around 60,000 transactions, totaling around $24 million. A couple other notable transactions, $1,600 for 10 pairs of personalized Ray-Ban sunglasses, and town officials did say public safety suffered due to this.
Did the auditor and his team, were they able to identify a particular employee or a particular group of employees who were responsible for most of this frivolous spending?
Yeah, most of the blame was pointed towards former town manager Sean Stiegel. He resigned back in December, but the audit found that $65,000 was used for a ghostwriter to write a book about his management style, as well as about $3,500 for a penthouse stay he used. So town officials really pointed the blame at him, but also took some of the responsibility for their lack of oversight for this frivolous spending.
Yeah, the town mayor and town council members, they held an emergency meeting last Thursday with residents just hours after the auditor released his findings. One of the big questions that residents had for the mayor and council was, are they going to get their money back? Will they get that money back?
Yeah, unfortunately, it looks like they're not going to be getting their money back. And to slap them around a little bit more, town council just increased their property tax rate by 8%. However, the auditor did suggest some recommendations, such as changes to those company credit card policies, a shift in workplace culture, which he has noted is already taking place. I will note, though, criminal investigations are still ongoing in the Wake DA's office and the State Bureau of Investigation.
Yeah, Cary residents understandably very upset about these findings. I spoke earlier today to Michael Anderson. He's an enrolled tax agent. A lot of his clients live and work in Cary. He and many other taxpayers spoke at the town council's regularly scheduled meeting tonight, which is Thursday night. Listen to what he had to say and why he and his fellow taxpayers are calling on the mayor and council to resign. So you and a number of other taxpayers are going to be speaking at the town council meeting tonight during public comment. What's your big message to the council and the mayor? Like, what do you want to get across to them? Is there something you're calling on them to do? Is there a question you want to get answered? What's your big message for the mayor and the town council tonight?
Town council and the mayor want to have this defense that they were misled by some mastermind town manager. Playing dumb is not a defense. It's a confession of gross incompetence. They abandoned their duty by acting as a mindless rubber stamp because it was easier than doing the work you were elected to do. So my message to them is stop passing the buck. You are a disgrace to public service in this town. If you lack the spine to read a budget, protect this town, resign immediately. Otherwise, my clients and I will gladly throw you out of the ballot box.
We'll certainly continue following what happens over there in the town of Cary. Over on the other side of Wake County, the state auditor this week released the results of his audit into the town of Zebulon. Dylan, you've been following that story. What did the auditor find over in Zebulon?
Yeah, so not quite as egregious as what's going on in Cary, and it seems like most of what the auditor recommended were just tighter internal financial controls, greater oversight. It seems like most of the fraud was actually centered around the former interim town manager. A couple instances, he paid himself to do some consulting at the rate of about $250 an hour. Also rented an Airbnb for about a month, and that cost the town about $7,000. So definitely the need for greater oversight. There was also a more humorous instance where a town staffer actually linked their personal bank account to the town credit card and actually paid off the town credit card to the tune of about $16,000, which the town had to then pay back to that staffer. So it just points to greater need for oversight and greater internal controls over there in Zebulon. But I think the broader theme really that the auditor is trying to show here, we see it in Cary, in Zebulon, in Rocky Mount, Elizabeth City, where the auditor is taking a look at individual towns on a more microscopic level and putting really these towns on notice. And I think the message to these towns is get your financial house in order.
Yeah, great reporting from you, Dylan, and you, Cody, as well. Thank you both for joining me this week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Up next, our latest installment of CJ Investigates. You've probably seen the protesters on bridges waving flags and banners at drivers as you've been going down the interstates across North Carolina. Our Spencer Bluth goes to one in Durham. Watch this.
A man in a white pickup truck was looking up at us, giving us the middle finger, and slammed into the car in front of him. When I'm here, I count the number of vehicles that honk.
I'm Spencer Bluth reporting for the Carolina Journal, and today we're at the pedestrian overpass on I-40 near South Point Mall. Here, a group called the Triangle Unified Bridge Brigade engaged in weekly protests and demonstrations where they waved flags and signs down at drivers below. Many commuters told Carolina Journal that those signs are distracting and causing an increase in traffic and collisions. After those concerns, Carolina Journal launched an investigation and pulled 1 year of DOT crash data. What we found is a significant increase, in fact a doubling in crashes and a 157% increase in rear-end collisions under this stretch of roadway while protests were occurring. Today, we're on the bridge to talk with protesters about why they're out here and what safety precautions they're taking to protect motorists.
I come out every Thursday morning to let people who are passing by know that if they're not happy with how things are going in our country, they're not alone. And they respond by honking and waving and flashing their lights.
And do you count those interactions from motorists of honking? You count that, is that right?
I count the honks. I'm a musician, so I can hear the different sounds of the horns. I can hear very faint horns. And so when I'm here, I count the number of vehicles that honk.
What's the record for the amount of honks you've gotten in the morning?
Over 500.
Did you undergo any type of training or preparation from your organization to protect people on the bridge or protesters and motorists below you?
Not from the organization, but I did do training with Siembra NC about ICE, protecting people from ICE.
Have you noticed any material changes on those policy issues since you've been out here, changes in the community on those issues?
I believe in this area the community is very much aligned with how we look at things. Not always, but the majority.
Do you have any concerns about motorists below you getting distracted by the signs, or do you take steps? It's on your website. It looks like you take steps to make sure that motorists don't get distracted. Is that right?
We try to not have there be moving things for people to catch their eyes, but we can't control if people are not paying attention to the road. We had one instance about a month ago where a man in a white pickup truck was looking up at us, giving us the middle finger, and slammed into the car in front of him.
Wow.
And caused a huge backup in traffic that went back for miles. There's nothing we can do about that. We actually saw it happen from the bridge. Yeah.
Check out our full story and investigative report about the crash increase here at the I-40 pedestrian bridge and the group behind it at carolinajournal.com.
Spencer's joining me now. Graduated from Research Triangle High School this spring, starting at Stanford University this fall. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Colin.
Let's start here. Why'd you dig into this story?
Absolutely. Carolina Journal heard from several motorists that commute that stretch, like I do, on a daily or weekly basis, that traffic was building up and they were noticing increased collisions. So we looked into it. We had several subjective reports from motorists. You've heard from the protesters on the bridge that they had witnessed an accident or two there on that stretch, one even where the motorist was directly looking up at them while the collision occurred. So interesting there. One of our sources told us that they saw a motorist in a Prius actually stick their arm out the window in solidarity with the protest and slam on their brakes to avoid hitting the car ahead of them. So serious stuff there that made us look into this.
Yeah, so you've hearing these concerns from drivers. You put in a public records request with the State Department of Transportation, analyzed the data. You found a 100% increase, 2 times as many crashes during protests, particularly a 157% increase in rear-end collisions. What's significant about looking at rear-end collisions?
Yeah, Colin, it's a really important figure. We spoke with several traffic scientists, data experts, and researchers before we conducted the study to build the study and after to help us analyze it. And one of the things they consistently told us was that rear-end collisions are a signal of a high traffic stop and start condition on the highway. Another interesting fact, when you look at the data analysis of the speeds of those collision speeds were lower. A lot of interesting data that shows that that might be also linked to higher congestion in traffic. So potentially here we're not only looking at increased accidents under the bridge, but also increased traffic congestion and distraction for motorists.
Yeah, so you went out to that protest, spoke to the 4 protesters on the bridge that morning. Then you reached out to their organization after that to get some more comment on your findings. I thought it was really interesting that one of them defended themselves by comparing their protest to a billboard. You talked to an expert about that claim. What did they make of that?
Yeah, I spoke with John Guzet, who's a fellow here at the John Locke Foundation, who told us that billboards are regulated across the country. You know, you can't have a blanket First Amendment claim on a billboard over a highway. Also some signal differences between just the fundamentals of what a billboard is and this protest. You have kind of an audio-visual stimulant component to this protest where you have people waving flags and signs. One of the bridge captains that we talked to actually was whistling at cyclists and walkers there. So again, an audio-visual stimulant. And there also were signs, not at this particular protest, but on others around the triangle they had posted on their website that indicated honk for fair wages. So again, an indication they wanted motorists to do more than glance. That was one of the defenses from the organization in their written statement, was that we're just asking drivers to glance like a billboard. Well, clearly maybe not, because they're asking motorists to honk there too. Interesting that that wasn't the only statement they provided. They actually provided a pretty lengthy statement where they went into the details about not only the billboard comparison, but also about why they were out there. They asked to see our data. We supplied them with that data, and they initially commented really critiquing and rejecting our findings. Carolina Journal then sent them a longer explanation of our analysis, helped walk them through that, and they since revised that statement to only say that they wish we would have included Tuesdays in a prior year of data. So interesting there as well.
I want to go back to the honking angle of the story. I think that's really interesting. I know in the reel, the protester you spoke with there said that she counts the number of honks they get every day. I think 500 one day she mentioned is like their all-time record. You talked to some legal experts about what North Carolina state law has to say about the legality of soliciting honks while protesting. What did you learn?
Absolutely, Colin. So in the state, you can only honk if you have a warning or emergency. It's pretty specifically outlined in statute, those instances. The protester that we spoke with, the bridge captain that day, counts the honks. She seems to be an expert in counting the honks according to her. And not only that, but the written statement we got from the organization says that most people honk gleefully. That's a direct quote there. So again, every aspect of this organization seems interested in these kind of positive, not warning, not emergency honks. Jeanette Doran, an attorney here at the John Locke Foundation, told us that there's legislation from the Ninth Circuit that almost dealt with the exact same statute we have here in North Carolina that held a motorist accountable for honking against the First Amendment challenge. So again, that honking not regularly enforced, but now when you're looking at it with a documented rise in accidents under the area, definitely something for law enforcement and policymakers to take a look at.
Yeah, some really great investigative reporting from you, Spencer. Be sure to stay tuned to our YouTube channel. He's going to have some more interviews with those experts he spoke with that'll be coming out over the next few weeks. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Colin.
Thanks again to Spencer for joining me this week, as well as Dylan and Cody. Also want to say a big thank you to Donald Bryson, Donna King, David Larson, Claire Olson, and the rest of the team here at the Carolina Journal and the John Locke Foundation for making this a fantastic internship experience for all 4 of us. And also want to say a big thank you to all of you out there who watch and read our content every week. You make all of our work here possible, so big thank you to you as well. The General Assembly is back in session starting Monday. The Senate is expected to have votes the last week of July, the House the first week of August. So Donna and the rest of the team will be back next week to keep you updated on everything happening down on Jones Street and across our state. Thanks for watching. Have a great weekend.